Hello, everyone. Welcome back to the podcast in another episode. And today's episode is going to be a really special episode because it's going to be about Connell's sister a year from her passing. I've also invited onto the episode Angela from Mental Health Awakening series we do every year. Last 2 years now. And I invited Angela because she works in the field of mental health. And today we're Connor's gonna be sharing like the mental health, how his mental health has been, and I guess the whole process around Ellen as well. And it's going to be a really good conversation, and I think it's really good that Connell has this is all Connell's idea. It wasn't mine. It was all Connell's idea to do this. So I'm glad we're going to do this. So before we get going, just so people know who guys you are, you've probably been on there loads of times, but it's just if a new listener pops up and hasn't listened to any of your past episodes, if you guys wouldn't mind just introducing yourselves. So I'll start with you, Connell, and then I'll go to Angela.
Hi everyone. Mason's gained many new listeners since I've last went on the podcast. But yes, I am Connell and I'm a mental health advocate and I do my own podcasts around mental health, and I've been on previous podcasts as well, just talking about my general life story. But I'm looking forward to this one in particular because this is for me, this is going to be telling her story almost, and talking about how the grieving process has been like for me. So hopefully this will give everyone around me, but also the listeners, a real insight as to what it's been like.
Yeah. I think it'd be really good for anyone who's seeing this today because it is good to. I imagine it's hard as well to do that as well. So Angela, do your introduction, please.
Hello to all the viewers and listeners. I'm Angela T. Jackson. I'm a licensed professional counselor in the state of Tennessee in the USA. I'm glad to be here today, honored to have been invited. I have over 12 years of experience in the mental health field, and grief and loss is one of my specialty areas, as well as chronic illness support. So I appreciate the invite to be present, and I believe it's very brave of you, Connell, to come out and share what your experience has been and to share your sister's story and the feelings that have come about in the process. There's so many different feelings that come up with grief and loss, and we're here to listen to you and here to support.
Yeah. Yeah, this is Connell's podcast. Let's just say, because he's going to be taking the lead, I think, today, and me and Angela are here to listen, and we can ask any questions. I'm happy to sit back today and let you guys delve into it because I haven't lost anyone really in my family as of yet. So it's going to be interesting how you guys say how you deal with things. It might be a tip for me maybe for the future if I do lose one myself. So so I guess Connell, to start off with, if you wouldn't mind, before you delve into Ellen, if you wouldn't mind just saying a little bit about her, like about your sister.
Yeah, absolutely. So, Ellen was my younger sister, and I've also got another sister who's they were both twins. So Ellen was autistic. She had a ADHD, PDA, which is pathological demand avoidance, and she also had a lot of health conditions such as colitis, liver hypertension, and other conditions that I can't really name or understand. But that was just that. But that's pretty much some of the gist of it. But most of all, she was pretty much the light and the soul of everyone's life, and the whole family loved her. Everyone she met, she really marked an impression, and she was unapologetically herself at all times, which is what everyone should aspire to be.
Yeah, yeah. I like because I follow your I think Adam's page on Facebook,
Mm.
and like seeing everything like about your sister and like always in hospital. I know, like I think it was very rare. I think she was out a few times. I remember you saying that she came home for Christmas once, and you highlighted that, and you was really happy about that because she's very rare. It's rare that she was at a hospital because she was always in it.
Yeah, so basically, with her hospital admissions, I think it started from um, when she was about, obviously, I'd say around 3 years old. So she, not only with her autism, but she was also non-verbal, so she couldn't verbalize her needs and wants, but boy, did she do so in other ways. But but in regards to the hospital admissions, um, it wasn't much when she was younger. She was very bright, energetic. She'd always drag me and Abby's my other sister onto the trampoline and play. And I think it was some of the best times we had. And always used to go to the zoo. We used to go to the beach. She loved the beach. She was a real like lover for sort of the scenic way the beach was, and she loved watching the waves, like sort of come crashing or whatever. And that was, and I'd say like Mersey Beach, which Mason is, was one of her favorites, like her absolute favorite. And I think with her year of passing, we went there to honor her, and it was really special, emotional, of course. Um, but the most important thing about this is that um, she really lived her life despite the limitations that she had to deal with on a daily basis. And I think as she got older, that's when she started spending a lot more time in hospital, which in turn affected my work at school, my performance, and it also affected the family because with my mum having to stay with Ellen, me and Abby would go to our grandparents, and during that period of time, our grandparents were basically having to become parents again, sort of raising us, and a huge shout out to them because not many grandparents or any relative for that matter would probably want to take on I guess that challenge because I was a hormonal teenage boy at the time who didn't really know any better. So I think that was a really hard period to go through, especially in school in my latter years, which Mason, and how it affected me and the support system I had around at home, but also in school, which was so important because I think I'm someone that doesn't really like to verbal like be a burden on others and just talk about my own emotions. It was very closed off, not really trusting of other people. And I think with that, I had to tell someone, and my mum had to make all the teachers aware that Ellen was spending quite a lot of time in hospital. There would be years where she'd spend more days in hospital than at home in a year. And the days that she was home, it was absolutely brilliant. Because I think it's very much she loved to be at home. She loved to be with her things, the familiarity of, everything around her, the sensory seeking and the comforts. That was one of the things that she liked about being at home.
Yeah, yeah. I like when you went to school, Connell. I actually when everything was going on, it was actually very good. You wouldn't think that you would go to school after everything was going on. So I think it was very brave of you to actually go in after everything that's going on with Ellen. And like I'm completely with you when you don't want to express your emotions maybe in a public setting to other people because it's very hard because like it can get overcrowded as well if people see that you're upset and like you have one after another people come to you saying are you okay, are you okay, are you okay, and it's hard and you don't want to like you say you don't want to give your problem to someone else and you maybe was feeling like that you were maybe a role model to other, maybe to younger people in the school, and you didn't want to feel like that you're maybe weak to them, perhaps. And yeah, am I saying that right, Connell?
Yeah, I think it is a case of, like you say, feeling a weakness because being one of the older members at the time, you are looked to as a role model. You're looked at as an inspiration to everyone, and ultimately that can be quite overwhelming. It can be very overwhelming with everything that's going on around you. You feel like people are just shouting aimless words at you, and you feel so overwhelmed by it all. And I think one of the things as well that I kind of want to relate to childhood is whenever Ellen would like drag me onto the trampoline, or me or any other family member that for that matter, although it was exhausting, but I look back on those times with real pride because as she got older, she kind of lost her spark and her ability to walk, and a lot of the time she had to go around in a wheelchair to places because there would be instances where she couldn't stand. And I think as she got towards the end of her life, it was pretty much my mum having to, sort of care for her 24/7 and caring for all of her needs as she got older and less able to, walk around. And I think that was one of the things that really made me sad. It was just so heartbreaking. It was really heartbreaking to see her suffer like that, and the pain she went through was something unimaginable. You don't wish that upon your worst enemy. You don't wish that upon anyone. It's one of the worst things that you can go through, and I see so many people with complex health needs, go through their struggles and they suffer through all the pain and adversity and they come through the other side. And I think Ellen was always a fighter. She was a warrior. She always defied the odds each time. And I think I'm going to tell a story here from back when I was about 14, 15. So this was 2016. Ellen went into respiratory failure. Her organs all failed, and she was in intensive care at Addenbrooke's and stuff like that. And that had such a profound effect on the family, especially me and my sister Abby as well. It just affected us in school and in so many other ways that I couldn't even comprehend. It was like an influx of emotions that I wasn't really used to having before. It was almost like I was grieving her then. It was almost like I was, kind of accepting the fact. And I think dealing with loss is such an awful thing. It's such an awful thing because especially when we're young like me and you, Mason, and you lose someone at such a young age, it almost feels like you have to grow up quicker. And that's what I found that with Ellen's hospital admissions, that I had to grow up very quickly. And I think I became very protective of, both of my sisters. I think that was that instant thing of if anything ever happened to them, the person, they're gonna pay. And that was one of the things as well that I just had that, protective instinct. And Ellen was, someone, like I say, back in her early childhood, very bright and outgoing and energetic. And she did some brilliant things. And the people that cared for her, like, huge credit to them because, it's a lot for nurses, doctors, and anyone that works in a hospital to actually, go through caring for patients on a daily basis. But I can really feel their bond for my sister. They bonded with her. They comforted our cries and like relieved our concerns. And they just, yeah, they were there. And I still talk to some of those, nurses. They're absolutely brilliant. I couldn't thank them enough. There's not really any words that I could say for how much gratitude I have.
Yeah. Connell, I appreciate you sharing all of that. It sounds like your sister, she was a fighter. You talked about how she made great impressions on you guys as a family, and the people that were around her, her caregivers. And I really listened to what you were saying when you said that you had an influx of emotions just when she was going through the changes with her health and when things started to worsen. And it's true. You can actually feel feelings of grief before there is a loss of life. What's happening is, as a big brother, the potential is that you had expectations for your sister. You had ideas and thoughts and hopes of what her life would look like as a younger sister, and as she grew older, and some of the fun you had. You mentioned the trampoline and how she loved the beach and fun things like that. So a lot of times people who are close to us, we also, as siblings, we have hopes and dreams, thoughts and ideas of what their life will look like. So you can actually grieve a lifestyle. You can actually grieve losses other than life. You can grieve the loss of items. You can grieve a move or a transition that maybe you didn't expect in life. Maybe even personally, maybe there is an illness, or maybe there's a change of plans, or maybe there's even a change of school, right? That plays into a move. So it's likely that you were already grieving. There was an expectation, and you were having to be introduced to a new normal. You were having to accept what this different life would look like while she was present.
Yeah, and I think as well, I remember getting told that she didn't have long left. I just got back from a brilliant holiday in America, and to then be told that she didn't have, that long left. And I kind of thought, at the time, I was like, maybe a couple of months. After I got told that, she passed away 2 weeks later, and we had to go and say our goodbyes. And I it feels like a blur, but I remember it so clearly. It's really hard to explain because it sometimes when you go through like internalized trauma, you tend to put it to the back of your mind, and you don't really like notice it until when you look back and you reflect actually that you remember it so vividly and so clearly. And that day I had to go, the day I had to go and say goodbye to her is one of the most awful times of my life. And the day after, she passed, and that's something that's forever gonna break me because yes, I can talk. It feels weird talking about her in past tense, even now, a year on. It still feels weird, but I find that what's helped me out in recent times and is talking to her as if she's still here sometimes, because that helps me, and I don't know if that's going to help any other people that are struggling out there with loss. But I think when you lose someone, it doesn't matter whether it's a grandparent, a parent, a sibling, or a friend, or a pet, or whatever, because that is valid. But I find with sibling loss, it's kind of different because you grow up with them, you lived through childhood with them, you triumphed, you had your ups and downs, and you know, and then when you lose them, it really does hit you different because they often say like siblings are the forgotten mourners, which is a phrase you've probably heard of. And no, I don't feel forgotten in that sense, but I know for people that have lost siblings that they do kind of feel forgotten in that grieving process because, everyone tends to ask like the parent or whatever how they're doing. And obviously, losing a child, I can't even begin to imagine how awful that is. I can't even begin to imagine the heartbreak, the sadness, and everything that comes along with that. And I think I've felt every emotion under the sun with grief. I felt guilt, I felt regret, I felt anger, I felt sadness and depression and anxiety. And I've gone through the what ifs, and what if that happened, and what if I've done this, and what if I, look back and try and maybe spend a bit more time. But I guess you can't dwell on that. You can't dwell on the what ifs, because that'll just eat you alive. That'll eat you alive day and night. And I found that with my bad days, what's helped me is that verbalizing it as best as I can, doing activities that benefit me. And I think that's the most important thing, is that with grieving, it's not moving on, it's moving forward with them beside you in spirit.
Yeah. So you're never going to forget Ellen, I think, because she's always going to be there. Like, if you're struggling, if I don't know, if you have an argument with maybe a friend of yours, it might be about football, it might be about someone else.
Well, yeah, I've had plenty of them recently.
Yeah. And then you'll think of Ellen and say, I'm going to win this argument.
No, yeah, it's it's one of the things. I'm very stubborn, and Ellen was very stubborn. She was someone that you knew what she wanted, and if you don't give her it, she'll certainly tell you. Even though she was non-verbal, she'd certainly tell you what she wanted, and when she wanted it. But she had the most mischievous, funny sense of humor. A lot of the things that she used to do just made me laugh on the days that I felt sad, and and she made the whole family laugh as well. She had that effect on people, and that's one of the things I'm always going to remember about her mischievous intent, the trouble she'd get into. And if she was quiet, she'd be doing something that she shouldn't be doing. And I'll tell you this now. In her room, the lamp in her room has not been switched off since the day she passed. It still remains on, and I think it's always gonna stay on, because I guess it's like, sort of symbolic or significant, because it's almost like, yeah, she's still there. Sometimes I do go in there, and it's sometimes I might just sit and ponder or wonder. But even then, when I go on walks, sometimes I talk to her, and people might think that's like weird, like talking to someone that's up in heaven. And I'm not a believer in religion necessarily, but I do believe that when someone dies, they go to a good place, and I believe that Ellen is in that good place. She's the most important thing for me was that she's pain free. She doesn't have to suffer or deal with the with constantly fighting against adversity, which she used to do time and time over again with her health conditions. That's something she had to do, and it's something she shouldn't have had to do. She should have been able to still live the sort of normal-ish life, whatever everyone calls normal. But the things that I remember most about her, like I said, is her mischievous intent, her sense of humor, and the impact that she made on so many people around her. It was unexplainable. Like, the people who came to her funeral, it was the room bit of the crematorium was filled up, like full of people that obviously that's family, but there's also people that cared for her.
While you were talking about her, the energy that came across made me smile. I don't know if you noticed, but just talking about how pleasant, how mischievous, how humorous, and just the very energy in you speaking about her is positive. It's that of strength, You know, it sounds like you all had a great bond. And as you mentioned, with her being nonverbal, I'm pretty sure her communication was just as strong.
Yeah.
You know, and even as it relates to the lamp, that stands out to me because there's a term called object relation that you may have heard of it. It's something that I bring up often with um, clients or people who are grieving. A lot of times, if you identify a specific object that you can direct that emotion toward while that person is not physically present. So it might be a picture. It might be something that you create, like a memory box. Maybe she was creative. Maybe you take an old shoebox and you put maybe her hair clip inside, or maybe there's a ribbon, or maybe there is maybe some achievement from school. And so just thinking about that lamp and the light remaining on, that's a sort of an object relation. And you said it perfectly. It's symbolic.
Yeah, and I think it is the symbolism of it. Like I have a necklace which I'm not really aware of jewelry as such. I've never really have been. You know, the most jewelry I've like worn is probably like a watch or whatever. But I have a necklace that says Ellen, my sister forever, and I got it a couple of days after she had passed, and that was quite emotional to get that. And I even like months later, I got a tattoo, which I don't know, you probably might see on the screen, but yeah, it's I got that tattoo, and yeah, it hurt like hell. It's when you get a tattoo, it's you have to obviously not itch it, and you have to try and the best and try and distract yourself in the best way you can. But but I think for me, getting that tattoo was very important for me to honor her in the best way, and I think that's something that I always want to do is honor her legacy, talk about her positively, and to always not shy away from the topic, because I think in the first couple of months after she'd passed, I'd tended to shy away from the topic. And I think it's, icebreaker questions. So when you meet someone new and it's like, oh, hi, how are you? But yada, yada, yada. And that question might be just so simple. But, oh, how many siblings do you have? How many brothers and sisters do you have? And as someone who's lost a sibling, that's a really gut wrenching question. Obviously, they don't know that, so it's not their fault.
Yeah.
But however, being asked that question is so gut wrenching because you don't know how to answer. And there'd been instances where, yes, I'd been asked that question. It was like, how do I respond? How do I respond to such a simple icebreaker question? I was like, what do I say? Do I just say that I have two sisters and sort of, or do I say, oh, my one of my sisters passed, that kind of thing? And I think it would be like, and that person would be like, oh, well, I'm really sorry to hear that, and they'd feel like, and they'd almost feel pity for you, and they feel guilty for asking that question, and I'm kind of like, don't feel like you can't ask me questions. It's yes, it might be gut wrenching and heartbreaking to sometimes be asked such a simple question, but don't be afraid to ask it, because I will answer the best way I can. And I think when I had counselling, which I did have for about 6 to 8 weeks, around 2 months, and it really benefited me because I was able to verbalize and communicate my thoughts around this. And I think it was better for me to talk to a stranger rather than necessarily talk about it with family all the time, because I think they're going through their different notions of grief, and everyone grieves and deals with loss differently.
Yeah.
Absolutely. Absolutely. People ask a lot of questions that are triggering, you know, and sometimes you think, man, don't they know not to ask that question? But as you said, to your point, a lot of times they have no idea what you're thinking, what you're feeling. And, you answer in a way that's most comfortable for you. So I like that you said that you had counseling for 6 to 8 weeks. You had mentioned before that you go on walks and you talk to your sister as if she's here. I was actually going to ask you what other things you do as far as coping skills. I'm pretty sure you learned a lot of ways to cope and to manage and express your feelings in therapy. Can you share with the listeners and viewers what you use for coping skills?
Yeah, sure. So some of the things that I use to sort of cope with this is, exercise helps for me. Again, walking is exercise, going to the gym is exercise. And I find that stimulates my brain into, sort of that dopamine in the brain. It's sort of, getting it into a stable, getting into a stable mind, because I think with grieving, people can sometimes develop unhealthy coping mechanisms unintentionally. And yes, I think sort of the first couple of weeks of grieving, I did do that, comfort eating. I did that quite a lot, and I put on quite a bit of weight, and that had, and I think with that is exhausting. I find, I think the first few days, I felt like I'd aged 10, 20 years. I think that's what like loss does to you. Like those first couple of days, you feel so tired, so drained, and you just don't know what to do with yourself. And I experienced so much of that. And I think one of the things that I've found is it's important for me to go on podcasts like this, and I've now felt ready to talk about this, and you know talk about my experience of grieving, and also tell Ellen's story in the best way that I can. And that's one of the things that's most prominent for me. But ultimately, I'll say this to anyone out there that's grieving: take it one day at a time. Don't dwell on the what ifs, and it's okay to feel guilt. It's okay to feel angry. It's okay to feel sadness and unhappiness and whatever emotion that comes with grieving, because you've got to realize that actually what you're going through is valid, and and surround yourself with a support network. And I find as well that when you lose someone, people don't know how to act with you. They don't know how to act towards you. They're like, oh, am I being like too intrusive? Am I not being supportive? And I think it's finding it's finding a healthy balance between, not being too intrusive and, sort of, being supportive. And I think with that, it's I found that, yeah, there were certain people that were being intrusive, and I just wouldn't reply. I wouldn't reply to messages, and I think that's perfectly natural, and it's fine, because you tend to sort of switch off, and you don't really want the last thing you want to be doing is replying to, messages from people that perhaps are of significance to your life.
Yeah,
Yeah.
I agree. And the thing with messages is it's always very complicated with it anyway. Like, if people message you, don't reply straight away, I think, something's wrong sometimes. And then I think and then it becomes toxic, really. And then I guess after these certain situations, like maybe with the loss and of your sister and people, you probably may realize who your friends are in a way as well, because I think it how I would react. I think I did actually. I think I said to you, Connell, if you want to chat, I'm here. I didn't bombard you with messages. I just, like, because I think you have to deal with it in your own way, and if you want to talk to people, you can, and to your friends. But I like having that 6 weeks with like a therapist, it must have done you some good, because you can vent out any of your problems, I guess, to a person that you don't know, which looking at it may feel like very maybe daunting because you don't know the person, but at the same time, they don't know you, so it may work. So they don't have anything to say about like bad about you. That maybe someone maybe that says that your friend they do, but yeah, I I completely agree with what you're saying.
I think as well, like you say, it's venting to a stranger that doesn't know you. And I think with my counselor, she was incredible, and she was, really empathetic and understanding with what I was going through, and she gave me strategies and ways of, sort of, coping with that loss. And as I think as well, it's loss is such a weird, complicated feeling. It's
Mhm.
sort of like the first couple of weeks, you try and get through the first couple of weeks until the funeral, basically. And, this is going to sound like really bad of me to say this, but I find funerals very tedious. And what I mean by that is that it's after like the service, after the funeral, and you come out, and it's like everyone like going on at you, talking to you, kind of thing. And Ellen's, funeral was absolutely beautiful. The music was very emotional, and we, told some stories. Like me and Abby read a poem that was written on our naming day from when we were, you know, very young, and we read that out, and I don't know how we did it, but we did, because even though our hearts were breaking, we were determined to, read that poem. I read half, and Abby read the other, and it was such a beautiful service. And but it's after I find tedious. It's after it, because so many people just talk to you, and usually it's people you haven't seen in like years, family you haven't seen in years, and I'm just like, go away. to, I know that sounds rude of me to say,
No.
but just go away, leave me alone. Like, and I was exhausted after the funeral. I was so exhausted, like physically and mentally. I was shattered, and I couldn't, you know, and I just kind of just wanted to be away from everyone. And I had a nap after because it was that tiring, because talking to people, especially after a funeral, can be just draining.
Yeah.
Yeah. Afterwards, I've seen situations where it gets treated more like a family reunion
Mm.
as opposed to a time to mourn. And it can be exhausting. I always think, okay, just wait, try to read the room, figure out who you're dealing with, consider the source. Some people may want to be close and have conversations, and other people need that time and space just to be alone, maybe to think, to fuel their physical bodies, get something to eat and rest. So,
Yeah.
one thing I remember is we were all a part of the same group at the time when I found out. I remember reading a post that you had sharing that your sister had passed. And so I checked in with Mason first, actually, to find out what he felt most comfortable with me doing. I didn't want to put a public post out there. So I went into the private group and just shared, hey, someone close to us um, has suffered a loss. Let's just be present. Let's just show some love. And I felt comfortable with that because now it's been what I believe has been 2 or 3 years, and I considered you a friend. But
Mm.
even, outside of being a professional or having experienced loss myself in my own family, the first thing I thought of is I don't know Connell's comfort level. So I want to be sensitive to that. But what I have learned is that just being present is the best thing, letting somebody know, hey, I'm here. There are a lot of things that people say sometimes that just make me put my head in my hands like, oh my goodness, you
Yeah.
know, the how are you feeling?
Yeah.
I don't like that question because
Yeah.
you can probably guess how a person is feeling after a loss of a loved one, or telling them it's gonna be okay. Let me tell you why I don't like that.
Mm.
It's because, you know, maybe it will be, but maybe that person is not ready for that right now. They're still processing. Maybe they're going through the stages of grief. Maybe there's a space where they're still denying that it happened, or there's still that level of shock. And you are entitled to your own feelings during that time. So there's a whole list of questions or scenarios I can think of where I'm just like,
Right.
not right now. Now
Yeah.
is not the time. So my go-to is just simply being present,
Mm.
showing love, um,
Yeah.
even giving a person space.
Yeah.
I think it is important because, like you say, Angela, you hit the nail on the head in regards to, what you should or shouldn't say. I hate those questions too. Oh, how are you feeling? Well, no, I'm not feeling great. I'm tired. I'm feeling all this unrelented emotion that I'm experiencing. So, no, I'm not okay. And yes, that might sound like a snappy response to such a simple question, but when you're grieving, it's best you don't ask that, because it's such a I'd say it's quite an insensitive question in a way, because there's probably been times where someone's lost someone. I've probably asked that question, but I realized I was like, oh, really sorry, I shouldn't have asked that. That's a stupid question. That's a stupid question, and I kind of just like, that's the best thing to say to someone when they've lost someone, is that I'm here if you need me, here if you want to chat, and I think that's the best thing you can say, without coming off as like intrusive, or knowing that person's comfort level, like you say, Angela. And
Yeah.
and I think it's such a to tread carefully when it comes to that, because it's a sensitive subject that we are talking about right now. And the most important thing is being there for that person when and as to when they need it.
Absolutely. Absolutely. When they need it. I often bring that up as well. Some people, oh goodness, they let go too soon. And what I mean by that is, around the time of the funeral, around the time where maybe family is coming in from different places or out of town, there are a lot of people present. There may be a lot of gestures or, tokens of support, cards, food. But what happens, as you said with the therapist, what happens 6 to 8 weeks later when you still need support? Are you still going to be there? So a lot of times I will say, let me know, not if you need me, but let me know when you need me. I'm here when you need me.
Yeah.
Oh, 100%. Such a it's such a simple like thing to say to someone that's dealing with loss and the aftermath of it. I think the first couple of weeks before the funeral, I was more or less plodding along and trying to stay strong. And I think sort of after the funeral, I guess I did allow myself to, you know, have a cry. And I think it's good to let out that emotion. It's such a release, and scientifically it's proven to, be good for your body to let out whatever that emotion is. Yes, there are days that I still feel, of course, I feel sadness. Of course, I feel, sometimes I feel guilt and regret. But I think the anger um, from compared to the early days has subsided for me. I think the reason that I guess you can get angry when it comes to grief is because like, why does it have, well, like, why did it have to happen to them? Why does it have to happen to me? It's, it's one of those things that you constantly ask yourself, and you internalize how you're going to deal with it and what's going to be next. And I think coping strategies and how people deal with loss is, obviously can be different from you and I or anyone that's dealing with loss. And like I said earlier, some people might develop unhealthy coping mechanisms unintentionally, such as, I don't know, drinking, like to get by day, which is, obviously can be a trigger, and it can be really bad for them to do that, and other like other unhealthy coping mechanisms such as overeating and not really looking after yourself, which I think we can all be guilty of regardless of loss. We can all be very guilty of not really looking after ourselves and looking after our bodies and looking after our brains, like physically and mentally. And I think one of the most important things throughout this whole process for me is that people around me have not been intrusive. They've been supportive. They've sort of been that listening ear if I need to. I think yes, there's been a few people that have kind of probably bombarded me with messages, but I just ignore them because that's the best way to go about it, I think. And but one of the things I'm going to say as well is that I did share a Facebook post about grief, and someone, I won't mention this person's name for out of respect for their privacy, but someone wrote in the comments which really angered me. Like really, really angered me. I'm trying not to swear here. And they wrote, I think he wrote something like, "We all, we all deal with grief. It's about moving on." And I was like, "Do one?" Like, that's such an insensitive thing to say. How dare you say that to someone, considering I'd not long lost my sister, really. It was like a couple of months in, and I was just thinking to myself, what at all? Like, honestly,
Yeah.
just absolutely such a disgusting, insensitive thing to say. Educate yourself. Like, and I removed that person instantly because, it was such a insensitive, damn right disgusting thing to say to someone, and rightfully so. I had people, defend me. I didn't ask them to. They saw what I saw, and he then deleted his comment, and I obviously removed them. And it was like, but yeah, that's the thing as well. People need to realize that the the words you say to someone, that's to anyone for that matter, can have such a damaging negative consequence on their daily life and how they move forward. And that they're already dealing with loss. They don't need you piping up and adding to you know the guilt and the anger and the sadness and everything else that you're feeling alongside that.
Yeah. When people do that, and there's so many scenarios that people can do that in, and I think you think to yourself, when they write comments like that, you think, what are you getting out of it? Why would you write that? Because one, they don't think, and one they just do it to probably annoy you, and anger you like you do. And like, you did the best thing there, just removing them, blocking them. It's one of the best things. And I guess it's hard if someone does that in your life and they are a good friend. You'd think they was a good friend, but if they're not a close friend, I guess it's not as much as a loss as it would be. But it is annoying. Like I've had, I think most people do have that hateful comments about certain things. It could do with loss. It can do with lots of things, but loss is a topic that should not be joked about, especially because losing someone, especially like you say, if that was shortly after like Ellen passed, There's no time to be joking. Well, whether it's not long or like a year later, perhaps.
Yeah.
There's no. It shouldn't be done. Because it is just disrespectful and not on, because it isn't really, because it's not helping you either, is it?
No, it's not. It's, it's like I say, such an awful thing to say to someone. And I found with that, I got instantly, obviously, I kind of got like defensive. I was almost like the overprotectiveness was coming in. I was like, no, I'm not going to have you say that. It's really insensitive and inconsiderate, and it came with a lack of care and understanding. But I think going back as well is the with Ellen and the days out that we used to have when we were all younger, we'd go to like we go to like, the park, we'd go to the zoo, and she would always cause mischief. And I think that was even a funny story which I'm going to tell now is that she was in, I think it was somewhere in Kent, or no, it wasn't somewhere in Kent, but it was somewhere. She was like, there was this like really big puddle, and I think she was probably about maybe four, maybe five at the time. She went into this puddle and she was just joyfully playing around in it, and I think everyone was almost like watching in like awe and amusement. And she even made it to a newspaper in Kent, which was really funny at the time. And it's it's one of the stories that I do remember, and I could tell stories about her for hours. Like for instance, where me and Abby would play Jenga, and I think we had a power cut, and she ended up, we were building Jenga blocks block by block, and she ended up knocking it down, and we all just laughed. And I think as well, that's something that I guess we had to understand and grow up, that she had her way of doing things, and that was something that I grew to understand, understanding her world and understanding her point of view. And if I could walk a mile in her shoes, like kind of thing, it was, you know, the the support that she had around her was phenomenal. It really was phenomenal. The amount of people that showered her with love and affection. And even then, like I've still got two of her teddies like sort of up there. I don't know if you can see in the background. And I've even got a little sunflower thing, which I may go and get in a second and put on screen. But yeah, she had a lot of nicknames as well. She had a lot of nicknames. Flower was one of them, and her favorite colors were green and yellow. She liked all the typical childhood shows that we all liked when we were kids. Barney, Teletubbies, and the Tweenies. And sometimes that does bring back a bit of nostalgia. Although there'd be instances where she'd watch Barney or whatever, or Teletubbies on a phone, and it'd be in German or Dutch or whatever, and it'd be kind of funny because it's just the way that they'd speak. And I used to laugh, and she'd actually just like full on watch it as well. But she used to have those little tellies you can get, and you can put the disc in and stuff. Yeah, she had one of them, and she was very good with technology, by the way, very very good. Like she could find her favorite videos in seconds. Like she knew how to operate a touchscreen. I mean, she'd always nick our relatives' phones and sort of watch stuff on there, and they'd still get notified and subscribe to random channels, and get their random notifications. Like she loved YouTube, but she also loved those shows that was such an important like part of her life. And sometimes I'd sometimes watch or hear it, and I would feel nostalgic, like really nostalgic about it, because as a kid we'd all watch those kind of shows, and that was really just amazing for me, like sort of seeing the world from her eyes, and she didn't have no enemies, no resentment for anyone. And I think that's how a lot of people should be. She, like I said to you, like very early on in this podcast, she was unapologetically herself at all times. She wasn't going to change for no one, and that was something I admired the most about her.
Mm. That's a beautiful share, Connell. It sounds like she was inspiring. She was her authentic self. I like that. I like that. Seeing the world from her eyes, that made me think of, maybe certain interests that she had and whether or not there are ideas or even dreams or hopes that she had that she may have wanted to see carried out. You could spearhead those kind of things.
I think that's one of the things that is important for me and my other sister, and and the whole family, is honoring her legacy and going about it in the right way. And I think it's going to be sort of a yearly tradition for I guess a year after she passes, like as the years go by, like going to the beach on the day she passed and lighting up lanterns and booking a beach hut and you know sort of laugh and talk about and reminisce about the memories, because you walk down memory lane and you when you go down memory lane and you kind of zone out for a moment, because you go down there and it's like she's there. And when you go down memory lane and you loot and you've lost someone and you talk to them, I guess that you kind of just zone out for a second, because of how impactful it can be just to take that trip. And sometimes I think there can be certain triggers as well with grieving, like something they may have liked, and then you realize you can't get it for them, or their favorite song comes on the radio. Grief isn't something that is just gonna you're gonna expect it. Grief is gonna come to you when you least expect it. It's gonna come to you when you're doing something on a random Tuesday night. Grief is going to come when you listen to their favorite song on the radio and you cry because it reminds you of them. You see something online that you think they might like, and you then get sad because you realize you can't get it for them. These are the types of things that I guess you can associate, because grief doesn't just show up on the day they die. Grief shows up all the time.
All the time. That's right.
Right.
That's right. Every milestone, every birthday, and not just her birthday, but the way that you're able to recall certain funny things, certain humorous times, those things could happen on mom's birthday, dad's birthday, holidays, right? Different, any significant date that's set aside. I know you guys may say vacation. Well, we say vacation in the US. You say holiday. So there might be a certain trip, so any milestone, any photos, anything like that, gifts, pictures around the house, favorite songs, all of those things.
Yeah, there is a lot of pictures of Ellen around the house. I think it's important because it's almost like, yeah, she's still around. She's still around the house. But I think but the thing I miss the most is that coming home and knowing that she may be there, and as I got older, I would go up to the hospital and like go and see her. Like every time when I was 16, 17, I was a bit older, I was able to sort of go and get the bus and whatever. And I would go there, and I think for me, that hospital staff, what they do is absolutely brilliant. I can't fault them at all. They pretty much get taken for granted, spoken to like garbage, and yet they continue to show up for patients time and time again, and that's something that's hugely courageous. Well, I think I bet, but the thing I found for me is that I think for me going there will be a bit of a trigger for me because it'll be a reminder. It'll be a reminder as to all the time that she used to spend there, and there was certain sort of things that would make me cry and would make me sad and potentially feel a bit of guilt and regret and and pretty much or even like pride, because with every, like you say, Angela, with every milestone, every birthday, not just hers, but every single milestone and birthday, it's, I guess, there's that one other person missing. That one person that should be there isn't there, and it's one of those just awful things that you have to go through for basically the rest of your life. And you know there's going to come a time where I'm going to have more years without her than she spent on this earth, which was 17 years. And that's the real, and that realization that sets in is going to absolutely break me. And there's certain things that do break me in that way because it's hard to describe, it's hard to figure out, and it could be really hard to navigate the feelings around this and the process and how I'm even supposed to function. Because I think with like work and stuff, or if your child, or if a child's like lost a relative, is sending them back to school, or they don't want to go, and it's understandable. But I think even then, it's that it took me probably a month, maybe 2 months, for me to fully go like back to work full time. I think after 2, 3 weeks, I went in sporadically. I felt okay-ish, but I could feel like the sense of pity from people and the sort of the nervousness, and I could sense they felt uncomfortable around me, kind of thing. I don't know. Maybe it's just me, thinking it, and maybe they'll realize, and maybe they're actually trying to be nice and supportive. But I could kind of sense the I don't know what to say kind of thing. And I've been in that position when someone's lost someone. I'm like, oh gosh, like that's so awful. What do I say to them? I don't want to come across as like intrusive, but I also don't want to, come across as being unsupportive.
Yeah, or insensitive.
Yeah.
It is an awkward feeling when someone has dealt with a loss, and the room around you, the people around you at work are still happy, they're jolly, they're functioning, and there's almost a hush that comes over the room when you enter, because they don't know, should we carry on with our conversation? Would it present as insensitive? Would it be offensive? So it definitely is a struggle to navigate. And there's that there's the space of acceptance to a degree, not fully accepting, or not necessarily holding other people hostage, right? But there's that level of acceptance that my feelings may change from day to day. Once you have that understanding, once you have the support that you need, one day you might be full of the happy memories, other days that shock sets in. And so you never can dictate how soon a person will get past one feeling or another. So again, it's totally up to you. And it's kind of difficult to navigate in the work setting, but I always say it's one of those things to where you can be open about how you feel and what you want to share, or how comfortable you are with people carrying on around you. It might be, okay, you might find enjoyment, right? Or just like, okay, they're acting normal.
Yeah.
Whatever normal is, they're getting through their work day. Maybe not the same feeling, but maybe there's a cue that can be given that says, okay, you can feel comfortable, carry on.
Yeah.
I'm good right where I am. Even if I'm not okay, let me have my space, right? And not be okay. You carry on.
Mm, yeah.
Because I don't know if this happened for you, but a lot of times in work settings, they might give a sympathy card everyone might sign, or depending on the type of relationship you have with people. And this may even circle back around to what you were saying about that post. It depends on the type of relationship you have with the people that you work with. The people that are closer to you, they might comfort you still. Other people who are not so close, it may not bother you that they're still laughing or carrying on with their work or coming in and out, things of that nature. So it definitely depends on the relationship you have with your peers and people
Yeah.
around you, because a lot of people, they may go through periods of even isolation, and if it's in excess, that might point to a struggle, a problem, or a challenge. But there are also that times that during grief, that being alone is really what you want, you know?
I think having that alone time, I think with grieving is an important skill to have, but there is such a thing as probably having too much alone time, because you almost feel
Absolutely.
lonely in that sense, and you're more alone with your thoughts and you internalize, you overthink things. And I think I found that although, yes, I love my alone time, it's brilliant. Like, after a day of like socializing, it's brilliant to have that alone time. And particularly, I value it a lot more now after, loss, is that I tend to feel, sort of after a social event, I tend to feel a lot more overwhelmed by it, and it's it's one of those things that's changed me. I'm not going to say that I've totally changed as a person just because of this loss, but however, what I will say is that it's shaped me into another new normal that I now have to live. It's I've got less tolerance for BS now, like way less tolerance for that, because that's the one thing that I will not tolerate and I will not deal with, because Ellen was the same. She wouldn't tolerate BS from other people, and then if and anyone really, because no one should have to change, or you know for other people, or feel like they have to mask themselves, because I found that with that is that I can now realize that actually, yeah, I can still be myself, but inside I'm forever gonna feel that piece of my heart has almost been taken from me, and that's never going to be filled. That's never going to, just go back together. There's always going to be that little piece of me that's, broken. Yes, I'm, moving forward in the best way you can. I think people tend to say moving on without no context. They kind of say it, they try to say it sometimes as, you know, they're trying to come across as supportive, but actually, I think the right words to use is that moving forward. And I say moving forward because it's not moving on from that person. They're always going to be there, and you're always going to think about them. You're always going to have these memories, and you're always going to think back to happy times and go down memory lane. But moving forward with them in spirit, they're there to almost be your guardian angel.
Yeah.
Again, like I say, not really much of, I'm not really big over religion, but that's the kind of thing that I do believe in, is that, she's got her wings and she's happily plane up there in the sky. And sometimes if the sun's bright, I know it's her saying hi.
Yeah. I'm I'm I agree with you what you're saying, Connor. I think she always will be looking down on you, and I'm a bit with believing. It's a hard one to because we all have our own preference, um, and that everyone should respect that. Um, as a kid, I used to go to church. I used to pray. I used to sing all the songs, but I'm 50-50 with it because I don't think when it's our time to go, I don't think that is the end. I think why would why are we all here in the first place if we're just not going to be there anymore at the end? So I think like Ellen is someone good and hopefully free of pain now. But within the one thing I hate when people say to me, and this can be do with grief as well, is
Hmm.
but at the same, it might be a bit selfish in our own minds when we say this because we don't know what someone else is going through.
Mm.
But sometimes people say this when they just want to be kind, but they're not thinking
Yeah.
about it. And what that is when people say, "I know what you're going through." Um, and when people say this, I I say it in a sense that, and Angela may relate here, within Crohn's, and that is a different part of grief, like kind of grief when you get diagnosed. I think that may be with any diagnosis, if it's an illness especially. But when people say, "I know what you're going through," and they say one segment of what it is, they say one segment of what it is, and then it's just annoying because and yeah, I don't know if you felt like I don't know if anyone has said that to you since with like your sister Connell, like people saying that to you. I know what you're going through and stuff.
I think when I've probably had a couple of people say that to me, whether that's intentional or unintentional, or if they're just trying to be kind, and I get that they're trying to come from a good place, but actually it's, do you know what I'm going through? Do you know the daily struggles that I'm dealing with? Do you know every influx of emotion that I'm feeling? Because I'm going to use two analogies here. So there's only so much you can do to keep the waves at bay, but eventually the waves will overwhelm you and you have to swim alongside that grief because that's what it does. Grief is something that overwhelms you and tries to drown you, but eventually you do come from that other side. And the other analogy I'm going to use as well is, that we used to go on a bear hunt book that every kid in the UK used to read.
Oh yeah, yeah, I remember that.
Um, you can't go under it, you can't go to the side of it, but you have to go through it. And that's what grief is like. You can't find a way around it. You have to go through it because it's something that you can't tiptoe around it. You can't tiptoe around grief because it's gonna overwhelm you on the days when you least expect it. And I know that when I first got into a job at the start of the year, I didn't like it. I think that with the grief as well, and the grief I was feeling, that didn't help. I felt very overwhelmed, and it wasn't for me, and the lack of faith, and I didn't feel like it was a nice, supportive environment. Out of respect, I won't name that company, but of course, it's one of those things as well. Is that I've come to realize year on that not everyone is going to be as understanding or as caring or as empathetic as perhaps some other people are. And that's just part of them and that's who they are and that's their prerogative.
That's it. And it's unfortunate that a lot of people we find now in this world, unfortunately, are quite selfish, and a lot of people just don't understand about certain subjects. I had last year I had a podcast with someone, and we spoke about grief actually, and it came up in a talk. We were talking about Doctor Who, which we both
Mhm.
like. We love the show, and in TV shows you can see grief on there as well. And then we talked about it in a real life setting, and we said the guest said to me, if if I had a friend that maybe passed away, like maybe a family member or someone close to them, I'm not gonna show empathy because I can't. And I I completely understand that because you can't when someone like a friend, maybe a person in their life has passed away, you're not going to feel what they feel, and that is very you wouldn't expect that of someone. Um, and it doesn't mean you don't care about them. It just means that you're not gonna feel it, and it brings back to the point when saying that you're not. It, it doesn't mean you don't care. Like you can be a good friend. I'm a good friend. You're a good friend. I think Angela's a good friend as well. We're all good friends, but
Mm.
I think I love the saying it only happened. You only get it when it happens to you or someone in your family, and you're gonna be sad. It is a sad thing when someone passes away. Um, and when that happens, like we were saying earlier on in the episodes, you're gonna you maybe kind of expect it if things are going wrong for a long period of time, and with Ellen, it was quite like you say, Connor, as Ellen got older, it got more frequent going to hospital visits. Um, but with that conversation I had with this person, um, I completely because we're all different human beings. So some of us will show empathy, and some will be sad. Some people won't, and I'm a bit like you, Connell, in the sense where I find it hard to cry in front of people. I think a lot of men do. It's one of those I think stigmas within mental health within men that we find it hard to let our emotions out. And I've done it a lot of times, um, and it's hard not to cry sometimes. You have like you say, it's healthy. It's healthy. It's a bit weird saying that, isn't it? It's healthy to cry because
Mm.
it's not one of those things you think is healthy because you think it's not good. Having all these tears like let out, it's not good. But I think the point I'm saying is it's okay not to show empathy in a way to it, being kind out of the whole situation is all you can do. You can't relate is I think what the discussion I had last year because if you can't relate like I think when people do say I know what you're feeling I think what they mean is they maybe have had a death maybe in their family perhaps but they can't especially if it's something so recent, you can't say it to someone because in their mind it may come across with, "Oh, look, you don't know what I'm going through because mine is completely different to you, and it might be a different cause as well." Yeah, I think that is one thing to keep in mind as well. I think.
Mm.
I think to an extent it's yeah, some that's obviously that person's prerogative to say what they want to say and that's how they feel or whatever, that's absolutely
Mm,
fine. But what I will say is that um having I think what that person's probably putting it across in the wrong like
yeah,
context, I think. Like
yeah,
putting it across quite wrongly because I think that person should have maybe thought about properly what they were saying before actually, saying it. Because I get it in the sense of if you haven't dealt with like significant loss before, you can't really, sort of relate. But I think you could certainly empathize with them with and be kind and courteous to them about what they are going through because it's such a loss is such a complicated um, feeling, and there's different types of loss. I mean, you know, losing obviously you can't expect that like family wise, you expect to lose your grandparents first, and obviously that's obviously not the case for everyone.
yeah,
But you kind of expect to lose your grandparents first and other family members follow along, and it's and it's, you know, sort of the normal mundane thing, right? But you know, that's not the case. That it's, you know, sometimes a parent might lose a child, you know, or, you know, someone die before, someone in a family might die before their grandmother or their grandfather, and you know, that's, I guess that's the way that life can be. Life can be cruel, incredibly cruel, and it's something that that I've come to realize. And I think in regards to sort of when I've seen other people, you know, they've lost someone recently, it's, you know, I can empathize with them in a way, in that sense that I've also lost someone. But I think unless you lose someone significant, you can't really, you know, sort of relate to their struggles and the internal feelings, because it's, unless you, like you say, Mason, unless you've like experienced it, you're not really gonna know until it happens to you.
Yeah,
Mhm.
yeah. I agree because like it's you're not good. I think that the best thing friends can do, people like me haven't experienced it yet, is just to be kind. Um, because like you say, you don't like you expect to lose your grandparents first, and then um, but it's something you don't expect to lose someone very young. And a lot of I think parents expect them to go maybe before their children as well. And when it is happens, like it must be the worst thing in the world, I imagine, because losing someone that was awful. It's just awful. And within the episode actually after this one, it's actually a remembrance of a person who had Crohn's. His mum came on, and I think it's great to highlight these kind of episodes and these talks, because I think the more we talk about it, and the more people it boosts people. I wouldn't say confidence. It just boosts their being of just to be able to talk about it, because at first you imagine I imagine talking about it's going to be the hardest thing to even to um the therapist that you saw, Connell. It may took a little while to properly open about Ellen and her life, and everything she'd done before at the start, especially talking to someone new. But yeah, like with the with empathy, I think I completely agree with what you're saying, Connell. Um, but I think everyone it's different in the ways, I guess. How we express what we say. Um, and yeah, I think like it's great that you decided to do this, because it is something that you're comfortable doing, and yeah, I've very enjoyed that you've wanted to come on and do this.
Yeah, yeah. You know, I want to say something in terms of sympathy
Mhm.
and also in terms of empathy. I was listening to what you were saying, Mason, about the conversation, and I'm so glad that the highlight was not on me. I was probably making so many different faces. And plus, I was also watching Connell's face because I'm just, observant, and I pick up on some nonverbal cues. A couple of the facial expressions was like, wait a minute, what?
Yeah.
Yeah, it was. I was like,
And so, you know, when you sympathize, well, let me say this first. So I remember getting these two twisted, and before I was in the mental health profession. But so sympathy is when a person feels sorrowful for what another person has gone through. Maybe you haven't experienced a loss in the same manner, or maybe you have not felt that wave of sadness, but you're sorry because you care so much about what another person is going through. So there's the sympathy that's the possible feeling. And as a skill, right? All therapists, well, I'll stick with therapists. I don't want to go down the line, doctors, nurses, but you know, there's a level of empathy that's required. So empathy says that on a level, I understand. And while we were just saying that everyone is not going to understand what you're going through, and something that I say often is, I may not understand exactly what you're going through, but I can relate to hurt. And so to a friend, a relative, a peer, to a client, that comes across as, I understand, right? It comes across as, and this is kind of a slang in the US, she feels me, she gets me, basically.
Yeah, I've heard that slang.
And so maybe I have not lost a sibling, but I understand the hurt of losing a grandparent. I may not have lost, so there's a correlation between the feelings that come with loss, right? Maybe as we were talking about circumstance, like grieving circumstances, I may not have lost, and a lot of people consider their pets as family. I totally respect pet loss. When I was growing up with pets, things would happen to them, and that was kind of the end of it. But now I do. I respect people who have had pets in their family for years, right? And have had to seek other means when their pets are ill. So guess what? I have to show a level of empathy toward the hurt that they're feeling and make suggestions for support groups or for groups who focus on pet loss and grief around that type of thing. So yeah, it really pulls at you, and it's important to know the difference. Maybe you don't fully understand, but there's a level of hurt that you can potentially relate to. And as you brought up, Mason, dealing with Crohn's or dealing with chronic illness, right? Maybe there are certain symptoms that overlap and maybe we all can relate to on a level, but how it affects our bodies can actually be different. But guess what? To a level, we can all relate. We all kind of feel each other's pain on that level. And we know what, and I'll even be personal, I know what it feels like to even grieve a lifestyle, to not be able to do things that I did once before, to not be able to maybe fulfill tasks in my life that I just knew I was destined for. So that is maybe where that conversation, I'm going to say what I'm thinking. Maybe it could have gone a little bit differently, but it sounds like there was maybe an attempt to relate and say, I totally don't understand, but maybe there's a level of sorrow there where they want to show care and concern. Or maybe I haven't experienced it just like that, but I know what pain, emotional pain feels like.
Yeah, definitely. It's like you say, it's that difference between relating and having that empathy and understanding and the care for what that person's going through. And okay, yeah, it's before losing my sister, I didn't really lose anyone of like significance. I had two great grandparents I actually had the privilege of meeting, and they lived for quite long lives. But you know And my great grandmother was 96 when she passed, and she passed peacefully. And yeah, of course I was sad. But I think the loss of my sister was I guess more significant to me because I grew up with her. I went through ups and downs with her. I lived life with her, and that was something that I now something I had to take into consideration because with that, and as well, like going back to the couple of weeks beforehand, I went to an event with the Moy Schools Council. It was at Braxton Park, and I remember, I don't know why I went, to be honest. I look back and I don't know why I went. I guess it was to just show my face and do something for the day. But I did it anyway, and I went and did a speech and to critical acclaim as well. The video is on my personal Facebook, and I've made it public so people can see it and people can share. And the amount of love and support I got on that was, absolutely overwhelming. It was, truly wonderful. I don't do these things for, critical acclaim or approval from other people. I do it because it fulfills me and it fulfills myself, sort of doing these things and honoring her legacy in the best way that I can. And I hope that I continue to honor her legacy, talk about her. And to be honest, I've even thought of writing a book about Ellen. That's a thought that I've had. It'll probably take me years, probably, to do. And it's like that thing of, I don't know where to start. It's like structuring a book. It's so simple, but um, I think sometimes verbalizing those thoughts and writing them down is such a release. And I've found that with like music and stuff, it's a release for me because I'm able to verbalize it through music, perhaps as to where I can't verbalize it just via speaking alone. People find different ways to express themselves, and I think with loss, it's finding that way that that is healthy and it suits you down to a T on how to fully express it. But I will say this to anyone that has experienced loss: don't go through this alone. Don't feel that you have to navigate these battles alone. If you don't have much of a support network, do utilize those people in your close circle because they might be there for you more than you think and more than you realize. It's not necessarily just burdening them with your problems, because loss isn't a problem. It's something that everyone goes through in life, and it's on us as a world and as a community to support each other through our plights.
Well said. Very well said.
Yeah, very well said. It was very well said. Yeah, I think it's been really great talking today about this because it is something that Connell said he felt it was time to speak about this, and I'm glad he did because it is good to learn a few new things, maybe how to cope when someone loses someone, for especially for anyone maybe listening, watching. If you haven't experienced loss yet, it's always good to support people that have, and if you have had loss, it is good to if you haven't, it's personal choice just to go on a podcast and speak about it, like Connell has today, because we haven't had, I know we had an episode just about grief. I think we've highlighted it, I think, in an episode, but not dominantly just about it. And I think it's good that we've done this because it's just highlighting that awareness and acceptance that we can speak about this. And with mental health, we can speak about our mental health and not feel burdened and not feel ashamed of ourselves. But yeah, I think it's been really good within myself, Angela and Connell. And I'm glad that you both done it. And in this special episode dedicated to Ellen's life, and it's been good to. I think I mean Angela have actually learned a few new things as well with like Connor mentioned the lamp, and like I think that's really good. And Teddy's that you mentioned of Ellen as well. I think that's really good as well. I imagine just keeping that. I don't know, going to sleep with it perhaps, or just having it on the side. Just signifies that she's there and just
Yeah,
there with you.
it's on my shelf, and she had Teddy mounted. She had loads of Teddies. Like it was
Mm.
literally just built like mountain, like it was literally mountains of Teddies. And yeah, and literally as well, I had to pretty much go through the rest of my apprenticeship with that loss, and somehow I managed to, gain that distinction. I passed my theory recently, and it's, for my driving, and that's something that I've had to do and deal with. And despite the adversity that I've gone through, one could not have blamed me if I did falter through the process, and people perhaps would have understood. But I think the most important thing for me is that I hope I've told Ellen's story in the best way I could, and I hope that for anyone out there that's perhaps experienced significant loss or not experienced loss, I hope this helps people out there for knowing, I guess, what to do when the time comes. But I guess you'll never be ready. You'll never be ready when grief comes, because loss may hit you unexpectedly. It may be sudden, and it's how you handle it, and it's how you I guess verbalize and internalize your thoughts. And I just want to say thank you for letting me come onto the podcast today to speak about this, because it was something that I guess I wanted to do for quite a bit of time. It was a case of, do I feel ready to? And I felt that obviously today was the right day to do so. And as well, just a real quick one. The World According to Ellen, that's Ellen's Facebook page. So if you guys do want to check that out, and you know and go through the posts or whatever, there's posts sort of every couple of weeks, and you can sort of get to really know Ellen and her fabulous life that she lived for 17 years. So I just want to say huge thanks again for letting me come on.
Yeah. It's been good to do this, and yes, like Connell says, just go in to the Ellen's Facebook page because it is great. Like a lot of dedication into every post, I think, on there, and also just reading it as well, you'll see all the great stuff that Ellen's done in her life as well as speaking about that in today's episode. And this episode will be here forever. So if it always be here, and so to people who are watching, whatever country you're in, if it's UK, if it's the US, I'm sure, if it's somewhere else in the world, Australia, a new audience is gaining in Australia, due to a new upcoming series called digestive
Biscuits.
no, yeah. I wish it was biscuits. I do like biscuits. Digestive Diaries actually, and that series will be starting. This episode will go at the start of June, but which it is now. But towards the end, it'll be an episode every couple of months where I'm joined with people, a few guests from Australia. Time difference is all well, I won't say awful. It's just annoying, I guess, for me, but I'm a night owl anyway. As you can probably tell, me and Connell probably are night owls considering the time difference for us at the moment. But yeah, that series will be airing every couple of months. So anyone listening, watching, keep an eye on that. But on this special episode, it has been a pleasure to speak about this. Angela, is there anything that you want to say to finish? or anything?
Well, I just want to say to the viewers and listeners, don't rush the process of grief. Be kind to yourself through the process. It's going to feel like a new space to you, even maybe a little bit of a culture shock, and seek professional help.
Yeah.
I'm glad to be a part of this episode. I've learned so much about Ellen and her world.
Yeah. It's been awesome. And one last thing I want to touch is within grief. I think we all think about it a lot of the time. Like before we go, I was just going to share something. When I was younger, I had a very big fear. I always used to say about like dying, and I was always used to say to my family. More to my mum, I'll say a certain thing that's in my head, and I'll say, if I do this, will I die? Just because I was very fearful when I was younger, and it was actually like went to like see people about it, and they literally thought it's because I was watching Doctor Who when I was younger, because like they literally thought it was because of that. Because whenever I'd watch it when I was younger, I would say, "Is that going to happen to me? Am I going to turn into that? Am I going to be a person with no hair?" So but in hindsight, I think I just it is a worrying thing to think about, isn't it? And even more worrying when you fear someone else and you knowing that you're probably going to be alive when someone is going to die. We all gotta experience it, aren't we? If we haven't or not, if it's just one person, unfortunately, it will probably be more, because that is life. We're not just gonna fear. We're not just gonna experience one form of grief. We're gonna experience lots. And it can be, like Angela said, really good point out earlier. It can be still when someone is maybe just really ill, and it can be getting diagnosed with something. It can be announcing that they are gonna unfortunately pass. Um, and when they say that, like Connell pointed out earlier, he thought it was going to be maybe a good number of months, because it is really complicated when they do say this to us, when like a family member is on maybe end of life, or they say that, and then normally it is a good few months, like Connell thought, and it's really annoying, really, I guess, especially if you are maybe autistic or maybe take things quite seriously. You, in one sense, end of life, you expect it to be maybe quite soon, but really, in hindsight, it doesn't mean that. It just means it can happen any time, really. But yeah, other than that, I just wanted to share that because I thought it was relevant to what we were talking about today. But yeah, but to anyone, Angela, do you want to read out the helplines for anyone before we go?
Sure thing. So for the US, I want to say also, as we're talking about grief, sometimes some of the feelings that come up, if the sadness is overwhelming, there may be a level of depression there. There is a suicide and support helpline in the US. It's 988. You call that number, dial those 3 numbers. There is a licensed professional waiting there to talk with you and help you. It can be early AM. It can be late in the midnight hour. If you are in the UK, the number is 999 or 112. I want to make sure I have that correct. But these are helplines if you are feeling hopeless, helpless, or even suicidal, and you need that additional support and just someone to talk to. So for the US, 988. And I actually have some different countries I'll start sharing as well. Let's see. Oh, I had it exactly right. So for UK and the Republic of Ireland, it's 999 and 112. Those are the emergency numbers. Argentina is 911 for emergency. Australia is 000. Some people might say, oh, 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 but I say 0. In China, 110. So there's an emergency number for support in every country, no matter where you are. And I appreciate Mason allowing me to make these announcements and highlighting the numbers. We want to offer support in whatever way we can all around the world.
Yeah, I think they are very important, and I think only recently when we've done episodes together, we've only just mentioned them. Because I think when we ever do mental health episodes now, I think it's very important to highlight those numbers. There are lots more countries, of course, in the world, but I think we'll be here to the morning. If we did to go through all of them. But if we missed your country, we are very sorry. But just if we haven't highlighted your country, just go on to Google Internet and just search your helpline. And yeah, it's one of the easiest numbers to know, I think, even more so than your own phone number, I think. But I think that is it from me, Connell and Angela, today. In the episode highlighted around Ellen, the memory of Ellen, and yeah, if you want to get in contact with any of us, our details will be on the description below. And yeah, thank you to anyone who's tuned in today, and anyone who's watching and listening. And from all of us, we hope you have a nice rest of the day, morning, evening, yeah, whatever time it is for you. But thank you. Good night, everyone, or have a nice rest of your day, Angela. And yeah, I'm glad we've done this, and thank you again to Connell for wanting to speak out about this. It's very good.
Thank you.